Could I be better if I did this or I did that? And I did it, and the guy who did it was one of the world's best.
When country legend Kenny Rogers passed away in 2020, the world mourned the loss of an icon whose voice defined generations. But behind the spotlight and the endless applause was a quieter story, one of devotion, heartbreak, and everlasting love. For years, his wife Wanda Miller stayed silent, choosing to grieve privately while the world celebrated his legacy. But now, she's finally ready to speak. In rare interviews and heartfelt reflections, Wanda opens up about the man behind the music, the husband, the father, and the love of her life. And what she reveals about their final moments together is something even the biggest Kenny Rogers fans never knew. The untold story of Kenny's early days. Kenny Rogers had the kind of career most musicians could only dream of, but his story didn't start with fame or fortune. It started in Houston's Fourth Ward, where life was anything but easy. The Houston Press notes that he grew up in the San Felipe Courts housing projects, a place originally built for white families. That decision displaced many families of color, and tensions were always high. Kenny was the fourth of 8 children. His father worked as a carpenter and played music on the side, while his mother held down jobs cleaning offices and working in hospitals. His siblings have often shared how rough those early years were. His brother Roy once told People magazine, "We were poor, there's no doubt about that," while his sister Sandy added, "We struggled, you know, but we had faith that we would make it through." In his memoir, Luck or Something Like It, Kenny opened up about the pain that came with those years, especially his father's battle with alcoholism. In an interview with Reuters, he explained how witnessing that struggle shaped his own choices. It was one of the main reasons he decided to stay sober his entire life. He feared he might be prone to addiction himself, and didn't want to repeat the same cycle. Still, that choice came with regrets. He admitted that he never really understood why his father drank until it was too late. He believed that after World War II, when so many people lost jobs and stability, his father simply couldn't handle the weight of not being able to support the family. Kenny said that realization broke his heart, because he only came to understand it after his father passed away. Music, however, was always there, woven into the fabric of daily life. According to the New York Times, nearly everyone in the Rogers family played an instrument. Music wasn't a hobby. It was a constant presence in their home. So it made perfect sense that Kenny would chase that dream himself. By his teenage years, he was already performing. At just 17, he and 3 classmates from Jefferson Davis High School formed a doo-wop group called the Scholars. They weren't just a local act either. They signed with Dot Records and even released 6 singles. Their success landed them an invitation to appear on Dick Clark's American Bandstand, a huge deal for a group of Texas teenagers. After the Scholars broke up in 1957, Kenny set out on his own. It didn't take long before he scored his first solo hit, That Crazy Feeling. He performed the song on American Bandstand and also on Houston's own The Larry Kane Show. It was there that his name got a simple but defining change. Rolling Stone recounts that just before he stepped on stage, host Larry Kane told him, "You know you can't call yourself Kenneth Rogers." From that moment on, he became known to the world as Kenny Rogers. Not long after, he signed with Carlton Records, setting the stage for the legendary career that would follow. In the early 1960s, Kenny Rogers was still searching for his sound. He drifted between styles, experimenting with jazz, folk, and pop. At one point, he even played with the Bobby Doyle Trio before joining the folk pop group The New Christy Minstrels in 1966. But that partnership didn't last long. Within a year, Kenny and 3 of his bandmates, Mike Settle, Terry Williams, and Thelma Camacho, branched out to form their own group, Kenny Rogers and the First Edition. It turned out to be a bold move that paid off in a big way. By 1968, the group had their breakout moment with the psychedelic hit Just Dropped In, To See What Condition My Condition Was In. The song became a huge success and even gained new life decades later when it was featured in the cult classic film The Big Lebowski. It's funny to think about, because in those early days, Kenny, complete with long hair and laid-back vibes, did look a bit like the dude himself. Now, here's where Kenny's story crosses paths with one of rock's greatest legacies. Imagine a world without the Eagles. No harmonies, no Hotel California, no Don Henley behind the drums. It sounds impossible, but it almost happened. And strangely enough, Kenny Rogers was the reason it didn't. Back in the late 1960s, Don Henley was drumming for a small Texas band called Shiloh. One day, while the group was browsing clothes at a Dallas boutique called the Electric Rocking Horse, fate stepped in. Kenny happened to be there, hanging out because, as Henley later joked, there was a beautiful woman working at the store. The two started talking, hit it off, and a friendship was born. Rogers was so impressed with Henley and his band that he invited them to Los Angeles. He even let them live with him for 6 months and produced Shiloh's only album. That move changed everything. While in LA, Henley met Glenn Frey, and the two went on to play in Linda Ronstadt's band before forming the Eagles. So, in a way, the smooth sound of the 70s owes a quiet debt to Kenny Rogers. Meanwhile, Kenny and the First Edition were still riding high with hits like But You Know I Love You, Something's Burning, Reuben James, and the Mel Tillis-penned classic Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town. But by 1976, their run had come to an end. The group disbanded, and Kenny found himself standing at a crossroads, ready to take another chance, this time on his own. At that point, few believed he'd find massive success as a solo artist. Country music wasn't exactly dominating the pop charts, and Kenny was already 37 when he released his first solo album, Love Lifted Me. Most people in the industry thought that window of stardom had already closed. But Kenny wasn't like most artists. His voice, his storytelling, and his calm confidence gave him something special, something timeless. The turning point came with a song written by Hal Bynum and Roger Bowling. It was a simple yet powerful story about love, loss, and regret, a barroom tale with an unforgettable twist. The song was Lucille. Ironically, Kenny's record label didn't want to release it at first. They worried it sounded too traditional, too country for the crossover star they wanted him to be. But once the song hit the airwaves, it exploded, climbing to number 5 on the pop charts and proving them all wrong. Not everyone was thrilled about it, though, especially Kenny's mother, who happened to share the same name as the song's titular character. Kenny had to reassure her that the song wasn't about her, which, in hindsight, was a very good thing. Because Lucille wasn't just another hit, it was the song that launched him into superstardom and marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable careers in music history. The shocking transformation of Kenny Rogers. By the late 1980s, Kenny Rogers, the man who started out as a humble country singer, had fully transformed into the undisputed king of soft rock love ballads. His songs had become a soundtrack to countless weddings, anniversaries, and quiet nights on the radio. Tracks like She Believes in Me and Through the Years were everywhere, spinning endlessly across the airwaves and becoming timeless staples of romance. Now, some might say Bette Midler could rival Kenny for that soft rock crown, especially with her iconic hit, Wind Beneath My Wings. Funny thing is, that very song almost became a Kenny Rogers classic. He once revealed that it had actually been offered to him first, but something about it just didn't sit right at the time, so he passed on it. When he later heard Bette's version, he admitted he was floored, and even called it the one song he regretted turning down the most. Ironically, this was the same man who had no problem releasing Morning Desire a few years earlier, a track that was a little more vivid, let's just say. But that was Kenny Rogers for you. Bold, expressive, and always chasing a feeling. As the years rolled on, reinvention became a big part of his story. By the late 1990s, Rogers underwent several plastic surgery procedures that drastically changed his appearance. Fans were shocked. He looked like a different man. But this shift wasn't random. It had roots in his own awareness of image and longevity in show business. In his book, Luck or Something Like It, Rogers recalled that after a guest spot on The Tonight Show, he started thinking seriously about how he presented himself. During that appearance, a lighthearted conversation with guest host John Davidson about his signature rose-tinted glasses stuck with him. It made him realize that staying relevant sometimes meant shaking things up. He later wrote that if a performer was afraid to change their image, their time in the spotlight would be limited. So, he acted on that belief. Within a week, he cut his long hair, ditched the glasses, and removed his earring. That transformation left him feeling renewed, more like himself and less like the man clinging to his old first edition days. In many ways, he had shed his past and stepped fully into the persona the world would come to know as Kenny Rogers. Even as a kid, appearance had always mattered to him. He once wrote that all he wanted in elementary school was to fit in with the boys, but still stand out to the girls. He admitted he'd been girl crazy since he was 6, which sounded like classic Kenny honesty, self-aware, humorous, and a little charming all at once. Fast forward decades later, and that same mix of curiosity and self-improvement led him back to the surgeon's chair. During an interview with Gayle King, Rogers said that with time and money on his hands, he began wondering if he could improve how he looked. So, he decided to make a change. He chose one of the world's best surgeons, but the results didn't turn out as expected. The doctor had a philosophy that the outer corners of the eyes should sit at a certain angle, and that choice left Rogers dissatisfied. He later told People magazine he wasn't happy with the results, calling the area around his eyelids too tight. He even admitted that the whole thing drove him crazy and was something he truly regretted. Still, he maintained a level-headed view of it all, saying he didn't know what he'd look like had he not done it, and joked that maybe his face would have sagged all the way down by now. Kenny had a gambler's approach to life. You make your choices, and you live with them. And he was never one to hide behind them either. He often spoke openly about his surgeries, even laughing about it with friends like Dolly Parton. According to Kenny, Dolly used to tease him mercilessly, saying things like, "Look, old Kenny's been to Jiffy Suck again." That was classic Dolly, sharp, funny, and affectionate all at once. But she also praised him, saying he had grown into his facelift and looked great. For her part, Dolly's attitude toward cosmetic procedures was a bit more cautious. She once explained that with all the fillers and treatments available today, there wasn't much need to go under the knife for big changes anymore. She believed in moderation, saying she never wanted to do anything that made her look like a completely different person. In her words, "You have to be careful with that." And maybe that was the unspoken truth behind both their stories. Beneath the jokes, the fame, and the spotlight, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton both understood something deeper. Reinvention is part of survival, but staying true to yourself is what really keeps the audience listening. The controversy that shadowed his legacy. Kenny Rogers enjoyed one of the most successful careers in music, one that stretched across more than half a century. But in his later years, his health began to slow him down, eventually forcing him to step away from the spotlight in 2017. As the New York Times reported, the non-stop pace of touring had simply become too much. Kenny himself once told Fox News that performing had become hard work, and that he'd promised himself he'd stop before ever embarrassing himself. It was a mark of his self-awareness. He knew exactly when to bow out. That October, at 79 years old, he played his final concert in Nashville, a grand farewell titled All In for the Gambler. It was a night filled with emotion and legendary friends: Don Henley, Chris Christopherson, Lionel Richie, and, of course, Dolly Parton. The crowd erupted when Dolly joined him for Islands in the Stream and later brought tears to everyone's eyes with her heartfelt rendition of I Will Always Love You. It was the perfect send-off for a man who'd given his all to music. After that monumental show, Kenny went on his Gambler's Last Deal farewell tour, but lingering health issues eventually forced him to cancel the final dates. Even so, he stayed true to his word. He wasn't one to retire over and over again. He meant it when he said he was ready to step back, spend time at home, and enjoy life with his wife and children. In the years that followed, his health continued to decline. In 2019, he was hospitalized in Georgia, sparking a wave of media speculation. The rumors spread so fast that his team had to release a public statement clarifying that he was simply being treated for dehydration. The message included a hopeful note from Kenny himself, saying he planned on sticking around through the years to come. Sadly, just 10 months later, on March 20th, 2020, Kenny Rogers passed away. He left behind his wife, Wanda Miller, and 5 children. When he announced his retirement, Kenny spoke with deep gratitude. He said he didn't want to drag out the process, and that he cherished every moment he had to say goodbye to his fans. He often said he could never truly thank them enough for the support and joy they'd given him. Those words made what came next even more bittersweet. At the time of his death, Kenny was still in the middle of a lawsuit involving a former friend and employee named Kelly Junkerman. The legal dispute centered around video footage from his farewell tour. According to the lawsuit, Rogers had given Junkerman permission to film the shows, but with one clear condition: the footage was not to be released publicly. Despite that, Junkerman allegedly went ahead and distributed it as a DVD titled Kenny Rogers: The Gambler's Last Deal. Kenny's estate responded quickly, seeking to block the video's release entirely and demanding $290,000 in damages. Legal experts suggested that the move wasn't just about money, it was also about protecting the legacy. The estate reportedly planned to release its own official version of the farewell tour and wanted to prevent any confusion among fans. Though pre-sale links for Junkerman's DVD occasionally appear online, they never stay up for long. The sales are consistently taken down, proof that even after his passing, Kenny Rogers' name, image, and legacy remain fiercely protected, just as carefully as he lived his remarkable life. Kenny Rogers' wife is finally breaking her silence after his death. Kenny Rogers' love story with his first wife, Janice Gordon, began long before fame ever entered the picture. The two met during their high school years, a time when dreams were big and life seemed simple. They fell hard for each other and decided to take a major leap, getting married in 1958 when Kenny was just 19. This was nearly 20 years before his solo debut, Love Lifted Me, ever hit the airwaves, back when he was still just another young man chasing his ambitions. In his memoir, Luck or Something Like It, Kenny opened up about that chapter of his life with honesty. He revealed that after their first time together, Janice became pregnant with their daughter, Carol Rogers. That moment changed everything. and led him to marry her. Looking back, Kenny admitted that while he may have been young and a bit naive, his feelings for Janice were very real. When speaking to Fox News years later, he made it clear that his love for her came from the heart. But love wasn't the only thing in play. The biggest challenge he faced came from Janice's parents. They were never on board with their daughter marrying a musician. Kenny once explained that her parents thought he had ruined her life and were determined to break them apart. He said, at just 19, he believed love was enough. But that lack of approval from her family eventually began to weigh heavily on the marriage. Reflecting on it years later, he admitted, "The marriage didn't work, and it's sad because I think it could have." Janice's parents never warmed up to the idea of their son-in-law chasing music. In his book, Kenny wrote that no matter how hard he tried, they couldn't accept his path. Whether he was working odd jobs or trying to make it as a musician, they viewed him as unreliable. He said that once they realized he wasn't going to give up his musical dreams, they wanted little to do with the marriage. They essentially wrote him off as someone who could never provide long-term stability, a judgment that cut deep. That strained relationship, combined with one particularly intense argument, brought the young marriage to an end. Kenny recalled that it happened when their daughter, Carol, was about 6 months old. He and Janice got into a heated disagreement, something he admitted he was prone to. Kenny described himself as someone who could get worked up in an argument, while Janice preferred to avoid confrontation altogether. In the middle of that tension, Kenny walked out to cool off, but when he returned, everything had changed. Janice was packing her things, and her mother was right there helping her. That's when his mother-in-law told him not to call again. And just like that, the chapter closed. The end of Kenny Rogers' first marriage, and one of the earliest hard lessons of his life. After his split from Janice Gordon, Kenny Rogers didn't spend much time looking back. That same year, he remarried, this time to Jean Rogers, hoping for a clean slate and a steadier chapter in life. But things didn't quite go as planned. Their marriage lasted only 3 years, ending in divorce in 1963, and the two didn't have any children together. Not one to give up on love, Kenny found his way back into a relationship soon after. In 1964, he married Margot Anderson, an actress and dancer who brought a new spark into his life. This marriage turned out to be his longest yet, lasting 12 years. During that time, the couple welcomed a son, Kenny Rogers Jr. For a while, it seemed like Kenny had found balance between family and fame. But as his music career began to skyrocket, the constant touring and long hours took a toll. The pressures of success eventually became too heavy, and by 1976, their marriage came to an end. The following year, Kenny walked down the aisle again, this time with actress Marianne Gordon. They married in 1977 and built a life together that lasted nearly 2 decades, a significant run by any standard. They had one son, Christopher Cody Rogers, and for many years seemed like one of those rare Hollywood couples who could make it work. But as time passed, the cracks began to show. By the early 1990s, Kenny was wrestling with self-doubt and the challenges that come with middle age. Their relationship eventually unraveled, leading to their divorce in 1993. Marianne would later describe that period as Kenny's midlife crisis, saying that even with all his fame and fortune, he was battling personal uncertainty. Despite their split, Marianne always spoke fondly of him, describing him as kind, funny, and full of good energy. Yet behind that charm, Kenny carried an anxiety that few people saw. As he turned 50, he began to fear that his career, the very thing he'd poured his life into, was starting to fade. He often talked about dreams where he'd go on stage, ready to perform, only to find an empty audience staring back. It was the kind of nightmare that reflected a deeper worry. The idea that one day, the applause might stop. Marianne revealed that as much as Kenny loved her, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was slipping away professionally. He felt restless, like a man searching for the next version of himself. When their marriage ended, it made headlines, not just because of the emotional fallout, but because of the massive settlement, reportedly around $60 million. After that, Kenny took his time before stepping into another marriage. But eventually, he did find lasting love again, this time with Wanda Miller. Kenny Rogers' love story with Wanda Miller began in the most unexpected way. Over dinner at a restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia, called Preachy. It was a blind date, and at the time, Wanda was a 26-year-old hostess working right there in the restaurant. That same day, she had been talking with a co-worker about how she hoped to meet her special someone. Her co-worker reassured her that her knight in shining armor would show up soon, and as fate would have it, that prediction came true just hours later. When Kenny walked into Preachy that night, he immediately noticed Wanda. Something about her caught his attention, and he couldn't shake it. After finishing his meal, he called the restaurant to ask about her and left his number. The next day, when Wanda's co-workers told her that Kenny Rogers had called, she laughed it off, thinking they were joking. But when she realized it was real, she decided to call him back, setting in motion a love story that would become one of the most meaningful chapters of Kenny's life. Despite their instant connection, the couple faced their share of challenges early on, the biggest being their age difference. Kenny was 28 years older than Wanda, a gap that made her parents understandably cautious. When they first learned about the relationship, they reached out to Kenny directly to express their concern. He handled the situation with honesty and respect, assuring them that his intentions were genuine and that he would always treat Wanda with love and transparency. Over time, his sincerity won them over. What began as skepticism eventually turned into a warm friendship, with Wanda's parents and Kenny becoming remarkably close. After 5 years of dating, Kenny and Wanda married in 1997. Their relationship stood out as one built on loyalty, deep affection, and mutual respect. Through the highs and lows of Kenny's career and personal life, Wanda remained his steady companion, his partner, confidant, and greatest supporter. Together, they built a life filled with love, laughter, and family. In 2004, they welcomed twin sons, Justin and Jordan, who became the center of their world. The boys brought Kenny immense joy in his later years, giving him a sense of peace and happiness that fame alone could never provide. Even after Kenny's passing, Wanda has continued to honor his memory in touching ways. She often shares photos and memories on social media, offering fans glimpses into their life together and the love they shared. On the first anniversary of his death, she posted a series of deeply emotional photos, images of Kenny with their young sons, a recent picture of her and the boys standing by his casket, and a tender shot of the two of them together. In her tribute, Wanda expressed her everlasting love for Kenny and reminded the world of one of his most cherished beliefs, that a person is never truly gone as long as they are remembered. In interviews, Wanda Rogers has opened up with raw honesty about life after losing her husband, Kenny Rogers. She's spoken about the deep void his passing left behind and how she's been navigating that long, difficult road of grief while working to keep his memory alive. Wanda often reflects on the small, joyful moments that made their family life special. Saturdays, for instance, were sacred in the Rogers household. Kenny had this adorable tradition with their twin sons, Justin and Jordan, called Super Saturday. It wasn't about luxury or fame, It was about togetherness. The day started with breakfast at McDonald's, followed by a trip through the car wash, and always ended at Chuck E. Cheese. Those simple, down-to-earth routines are what the family cherishes and misses the most. Moments when Kenny was just dad, not the superstar on stage. In quieter moments, Wanda has shared how much she longs for Kenny's presence, his love, his support, even just his touch. She's spoken about wishing for one more conversation, just to make sure he's all right. Her grief journey hasn't been easy, but through it all, she's stayed determined to celebrate his life and protect his legacy. She hasn't done it alone. One of Kenny's dearest friends, Lionel Richie, has been a steady source of comfort. Their friendship stretched back decades. Lionel even lived with Kenny in Los Angeles during their early days in the music scene. After Kenny's passing, Lionel stepped in like family, checking in regularly and offering encouragement to Wanda and the boys. Wanda describes Lionel as more than a friend. He's like a brother, someone who genuinely cares and still honors the bond they all shared. Among Wanda's most cherished memories is the final day she spent with Kenny at home. It was peaceful, just the two of them watching movies. Kenny was enjoying one of his favorite treats, vanilla ice cream drizzled with chocolate sauce. There was nothing grand about that moment, but it carried a quiet beauty. It was filled with comfort, laughter, and love. Wanda still revisits the journal entries she wrote that day, finding solace in reliving their last hours together. Their sons, Justin and Jordan, have found their own ways to stay connected to their father. They often tell stories about him and share memories that keep his spirit alive within their home. They also lean on prayer, feeling his presence in small, unexpected signs, like when one of his songs suddenly plays while they're out shopping or driving. To them, it feels like Kenny's gentle reminder that he's still with them. Still, Wanda admits that grief sometimes comes with guilt, especially when big milestones roll around, like the boys' graduations. The reality that Kenny won't be there physically still stings, but she holds firm to the belief that he's watching over them, guiding them from beyond. Over time, the family began to notice something special. Red birds started appearing whenever they talked about Kenny, often landing on their balcony as if to say hello. For Wanda and the boys, these visits have become powerful symbols of Kenny's spirit. Lionel Richie once told Wanda that signs from Kenny would come when the time was right, and when those red birds showed up, she knew he was right. Even before his passing, Kenny had thought carefully about what he wanted for his family. He told Wanda, who was 56 at the time, that he wanted her to find love again someday, to be happy, and move forward. At the time, she couldn't bear to think about that, brushing it off and asking him to turn the TV back on. Years later, in 2023, Wanda found herself stepping into a new chapter, finding love once more. She believes it's exactly what Kenny would have wanted. It's also a powerful example for their sons, that it's okay to keep living, to find joy again, even after deep loss. For Wanda, Kenny's words were proof of his incredible heart and the kind of love that was rooted in selflessness. That same year, Wanda poured her heart into curating a new album titled Life is Like a Song, featuring songs Kenny recorded between 2008 and 2011. This wasn't just a project. It was her way of ensuring his music and message would continue to inspire. She believed Kenny would be proud of it because it reflected his lifelong mission: to express in his songs what every man wanted to say and every woman wanted to hear. Now, as Wanda moves forward, she carries both her grief and her gratitude side by side. The love she shared with Kenny remains an unshakable part of her, shaping every step of her journey. Their story stands as a beautiful reminder that love doesn't end, it evolves. Even in loss, it teaches us how to embrace life, healing, and new beginnings.